What if a message meant for someone else found its way to the one person who needed it most? And what if that accidental moment became the first step toward healing everything they'd both been running from? Before we begin this unforgettable journey of hope, quiet redemption, and a love that wasn't supposed to happen, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories that stay with you long after they end. Now, let's begin. Single Dad replied to a late text that wasn't for him, but the CEO said, "I was hoping you'd come." The text came in just before midnight. Tom Harding squinted at the flickering screen of his old phone, the glow casting sharp shadows across the cluttered table. He had just set down his wrench, wiped the grease from his hands, and was reaching for the lukewarm mug of coffee when the notification buzzed. His son, Noah, 10 years old and curled up on the old couch in the living room, stirred, but didn't wake. Tom glanced at him, then at the message. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but if you're still out there, I'll be at the place. I'll wait, no name, no context, just that." He blinked. Probably the wrong number. Happens all the time. He picked up the mug, sipped. Too bitter. He looked back at the phone. A part of him wanted to ignore it, delete it, forget it ever came through. It wasn't his business. He had enough to deal with rent due in 3 days, a broken water heater in the Johnsons' place he'd promised to fix tomorrow, and Noah's worsening fear of crowds that made school a daily battlefield. But something about that message itched under his skin. The phrasing, the silence behind it, a plea wrapped in quiet desperation. And then, without warning, the memory struck. Another message, another night, 3 years ago. Tom, stuck in traffic, phone buzzing in the passenger seat. He hadn't checked it right away. By the time he did, his wife Lily had already swerved off the icy road, trying to drive herself to the ER. She hadn't made it. His throat tightened. He looked at Noah again. The boy's small frame rising and falling, his fingers loosely gripping the sleeve of the blanket. Since the accident, Noah hadn't been the same. He rarely spoke outside their home. Loud sounds made him flinch. And Tom. He hadn't let himself feel much at all. There was work, there was parenting, there was surviving. That was it. Until now. His finger hovered over the phone screen. Then, almost without thinking, he typed, "I think you sent this to the wrong person. But if you need someone to talk to, I'm listening." He hesitated before pressing send. Was it stupid, risky? Maybe. But something told him this wasn't just a drunk message. It didn't feel like a prank. It felt like someone on the edge. The phone buzzed again a minute later. "If you're coming, I'll be at Old Pines Cafe. Until midnight." He stared at the words. Old Pines. That dusty cafe on the edge of town, the one that never closed, that smelled like burnt toast and stale cinnamon, run by the same old woman who played jazz vinyls and offered free coffee refills without asking. That place. Tom stood up slowly, setting the mug down. He grabbed his coat from the hook, moved to the couch, and knelt by Noah. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "I need to step out for a bit. Just a quick job. Mrs. Gilmore next door is home. If anything happens, knock on her door, okay?" Noah stirred, blinked. "Where?" "Just fixing something for someone," Tom said softly. "I'll be back soon." The boy nodded, barely awake. Tom pulled on his boots, glanced at the phone one last time, and stepped into the cold. It took 10 minutes to drive through the sleeping town. Snow flurried gently across the windshield, dissolving on contact. The streets were quiet, the lights in most windows dark. Tom parked across from Old Pines and cut the engine. The cafe's sign buzzed weakly in the cold. One of the letters N was still out. Through the large front window, Tom could see the warm glow of low-hanging lights. Inside, a woman sat alone at a corner table, her coat still on hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Her posture wasn't slouched or defeated, it was controlled, tense, like a branch bent too far but not yet broken. Tom entered. The chime above the door rang out. The warmth hit him like a breath. Behind the counter, June, the cafe owner, looked up from her crossword puzzle and gave a brief nod of recognition. She knew Tom. Everyone did. But tonight she said nothing. She just tilted her head toward the corner where the woman sat. Tom approached slowly. The woman looked up. She was striking. Not in the glamorous, glossy way he sometimes saw in ads or billboards downtown, but in the kind of way that made you look twice like a photograph you couldn't stop thinking about. Sharp features, but tired eyes. Hair in a neat bun, lips pressed together tightly. She didn't look drunk. She looked braced. "You're not him," she said after a moment, eyes narrowing. "No," Tom replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "I'm not. But you messaged me." A pause. Then the faintest flicker of something across her face, surprise, maybe even disappointment. "I sent that message a year ago," she murmured more to herself than to him. "Saved it as a draft. Must have accidentally sent it now. It was never meant for you." "Well," Tom said, offering a slight smile, "maybe it found the right person anyway." She stared at him, then laughed, short, bitter, but not entirely cold. "I'm Evelyn," she said, finally extending her hand. "Tom." They shook hands. Neither of them reached for their coffee. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was just there. Like something old and familiar, neither of them remembered how to name. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, two strangers sat at a small table under yellow lights, each holding more weight in their hearts than their hands could carry. Neither said it, but both understood something had shifted. The message had gone astray. But somehow it had arrived exactly where it needed to. And midnight wasn't over yet. The wind outside howled like something restless. Inside Old Pine's cafe, the world felt paused, as if the hands of the clock were waiting for something more human than time to pass. Tom sat across from Evelyn, their cups untouched. Around them, the quiet hum of the cafe filled the air, the gentle clink of June rinsing mugs behind the counter, a soft jazz melody spilling from the old record player in the corner, and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. It was Tom who broke the silence first. "You okay?" he asked softly. Evelyn looked at him, her expression unreadable. She had the kind of presence that made people sit straighter. Even now, in jeans and a gray wool coat, hair slightly disheveled from the wind, she carried herself like someone used to being in charge, but deeply, quietly exhausted. "No," she said. "But I'm better than I was an hour ago." Tom nodded slowly. He understood the kind of tired that didn't go away with sleep. Evelyn shifted in her seat, gaze falling to her hands still clasped around her coffee cup. It was stupid. The message. "I shouldn't have sent it." "You didn't," he replied gently. "You said it was a draft from a year ago." She let out a humorless breath. "That's the thing, Tom. I remember writing it. I'd just come out of a boardroom meeting and everyone was celebrating some $1 million contract. I went into the bathroom and cried so hard I tore my mascara into the seams of my sleeves." Tom remained quiet. "I wrote that message thinking I might send it to someone," she said, her voice catching. "But I never hit send. Or I didn't think I did. I saved it, closed the app, got in my car, went home, drank a bottle of wine, cried again, woke up, went back to work, and kept going. That's what you do, right? You keep going." He studied her. The CEO mask was slipping, but beneath it, was the real her. The version that had been standing at a cliff's edge whispering for someone to see her without ever saying a word. "I don't think it was stupid," Tom said finally. "I think it was brave." Evelyn blinked, taken aback. "I mean, who writes a message like that unless they're still holding on to something, a shred of hope, or even just a question no one's ever bothered to answer?" She swallowed suddenly, blinking faster than before. "I didn't expect anyone to show up," she whispered. Tom offered a wry smile. "I didn't expect to leave my house tonight either. My son's probably dreaming I'm off fighting aliens." Evelyn chuckled genuinely this time. The sound surprised even her. "Is he little 10? Tom said, pride sneaking into his voice. "Name's Noah. Smart kid, loves model cars and refuses to eat anything green. Sounds like he's got good taste." They both laughed softly as if afraid the moment might break. Evelyn sat back in her chair. Her fingers loosened from the coffee cup, finally letting it go. "So what do you do, Tom? Besides answering strange texts and rescuing strangers from their regrets?" "Handyman," he said simply. "Repairs installations. Used to be a mechanical engineer." Life shifted. She raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way to fall." Tom didn't flinch. No, just a different ladder. Evelyn studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable again. June approached with a quiet grace and set down 2 fresh mugs of cocoa. She didn't ask, didn't interrupt, just smiled kindly and walked away. "I don't know why I stayed here tonight," Evelyn said after a long pause. "I told myself I'd leave at midnight, that I'd get up, walk out, and never look back, like I always do. But you didn't." She stared into the swirl of her drink as if it might reveal something. "No, I didn't, because something in me wanted someone, anyone, just to show up." Tom sat still, letting the moment stretch. "And you did," she said quietly. "And you're not even the right person." Tom looked at her gently. "Maybe not, but I'm here." That silenced her. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she whispered almost to herself, "It's been a long time since I believed someone would show up." He wanted to ask what happened. Who hurt her? What kind of scars she carried beneath the calm exterior? But he knew better. Some stories don't come out when asked. They come out when they're ready. Like old wounds, they wait for the right touch to reopen, only this time to heal. Outside, the snow had begun to fall more steadily, softening the world with its hush. "I should probably let you go," Evelyn said, standing. "You have a child to get back to. A life. And I've already taken more of your night than I should have." Tom stood as well, pulling on his jacket. "I didn't come here by accident, Evelyn. And I don't think you stayed here by accident either." She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Then, slowly, she turned. There was vulnerability in her eyes now. Real, raw, and unguarded. "I own a place a few miles outside town," she said hesitantly. "Old house, falling apart. I've been meaning to get it fixed for a while now. Can't bring myself to step inside it, though." Tom looked at her, then nodded once. "Give me the address. I'll take a look." The door swung open, letting in the cold. But as they stepped into the snow together, 2 strangers whose lives had barely brushed, there was a quiet warmth between them. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that waits patiently to be trusted again. And that night, as the cafe's sign buzzed behind them and the snowfall whispered softly on their shoulders, Evelyn Drake realized something she hadn't let herself believe in a long time. Someone had shown up. And maybe, just maybe, that was where it began. It was 2 days before Tom drove out to the old house Evelyn had mentioned. The address she'd scribbled on the back of a napkin led him past the edge of town where the streetlights faded and the fields opened wide into winter, still silence. The house stood near the bend of an old road hidden behind a grove of leafless trees, its porch sagging, its windows clouded with time. Tom parked his truck by the crumbling fence, took a breath, and stepped out. The cold air bit through his jacket. He looked up at the house, one hand on the strap of his tool bag, the other adjusting the cap on his head. A house like this had stories. He could feel them pressing against the walls like forgotten breaths. He knocked on the front door once, then again. No answer. He tried the handle. It turned with a reluctant groan. Inside, the air was stale, laced with dust and memory. The floor creaked beneath his boots. He paused in the entryway, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness. The furniture was covered in white sheets like ghosts trying to sleep. The hearth was cold. The smell of cedar and age lingered in the wood-paneled walls. And then her voice. "I didn't think you'd actually come." He turned. Evelyn stood at the top of the stairs, dressed not in business attire but in a thick sweater and jeans, her hair loose feet bare on the creaking wood. She looked smaller here somehow. Or maybe just realer. "I said I would," Tom said. She descended the stairs slowly, hand-trailing the railing. "I thought you might reconsider. People usually do when they see this place." Tom looked around. "It has good bones." Evelyn huffed a laugh. "That's a polite way of saying it's falling apart. I've worked with worse." He smiled. "Way worse." They walked through the rooms together, her quietly observing him, taking notes, inspecting pipes, testing light switches that didn't respond. He asked questions about the wiring, the foundation, the plumbing. She answered most with shrugs or murmurs. In the kitchen, they stopped. A rusted teapot sat abandoned on the stove. A child's crayon drawing was still taped to the side of the fridge, its colors faded. A crooked heart in the corner bore a shaky signature. E.D. Tom looked at it. "Yours," she nodded. "I must have been 5. My mother left it up there until the day she left." He said nothing. "She walked out one summer night. Told me she was going to get milk." Evelyn's voice barely rose above a whisper. "She never came back." Tom didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. His silence was the kind that made room for pain, not the kind that turned away from it. Evelyn continued. "The house was taken over by the state after that. I bounced through foster homes, then college, then corporate life. I bought the house back 5 years ago. I thought I'd turn it into something useful, but every time I stepped inside it just froze me." Tom glanced at the drawing again. It froze time, too. She turned to him, brows furrowed. "You left this place as a child," he said gently, "but something in you never got to walk out with her. That girl's still standing in this kitchen waiting." Evelyn didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. Tom rolled up his sleeves. "Well, let's start by giving her some heat. Furnace first." By late afternoon, the old system groaned back to life, the radiators ticking with warmth. Dust danced in the light, streaming through cracked windows. Evelyn brought out instant coffee from a box she hadn't opened in years. They sat on the back steps overlooking a barren garden plot and the woods beyond. "You're different than I expected," she said. "Expected what I thought you'd be. Simpler, maybe. A quiet guy with a toolbox and no opinions." Tom grinned. "I have plenty of opinions. I just don't throw them around like nails." Evelyn smiled, but then her gaze turned distant. "I've spent my whole life building things. Skyscrapers, corporate teams, empires even. But not once have I stayed long enough to repair something personal. I was always running toward the next goalpost. What changed?" She looked at him. A message I didn't send somehow found its way. He looked down at the coffee in his hands. "You're not the only one who's been stuck in place." She turned to him, listening. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said quietly. "She sent me a text. I didn't see it until it was too late. I was working late, stuck under a water tank at a job site. By the time I got home, the ambulance was already there." Evelyn's breath caught. "Tom, I'm sorry." He nodded. Noah was 5. He was in the car with her. Nothing major, just bruises. But he saw it all. And since then he's never been the same. He talks to me, but he shuts down with anyone else. Won't speak at school. Panics around strangers. You've raised him alone, every day since. Silence fell between them again, but not the heavy kind. It was a space, a breath. A place where grief could sit beside another person's without needing to be explained away. "I don't really know why I asked you to come," Evelyn murmured after a long pause. "I just knew I couldn't face this place alone." Tom didn't hesitate. "Then I'm glad I showed up." She looked at him, truly looked, and something softened in her posture. Not submission, not vulnerability, something closer to release. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the frozen ground, Evelyn reached inside her coat and pulled out the old napkin he had returned with. She smoothed it flat on her lap and stared at the message scribbled on it. "I'll wait. I didn't even remember writing this," she said, voice trembling. "But it found its way to you." Tom looked at her steady and sure. Maybe it was meant to. And in that moment, Evelyn Drake, CEO strategist survivor, let herself believe something she hadn't in a very long time, that maybe some messages don't get lost. They simply wait until the right person is ready to hear them. Tom didn't bring Noah the first few times he returned to work on the house. He wasn't sure how Evelyn would respond to his son's quiet presence, and more than that, he wasn't sure how Noah would respond to the house. But one Saturday morning after Tom caught him tracing tire marks in flour on the kitchen floor with a toy car, he paused. Something about the way the boy looked up hopeful curious made Tom think maybe it was time. "Want to come with me today?" Tom asked. Noah blinked. "To the house?" "Yeah, that old place I told you about." The boy clutched the car tighter. "Will it be loud?" Tom smiled, just the creaky kind of loud. "I'll be there. You can stay in the living room or explore if you want. No pressure." Noah thought about it, then nodded, slow but firm. By midday, the sun had melted the frost off the grass and Noah was bundled in his oversized jacket sitting on the living room floor of Evelyn's house wheels of his car gliding silently over the hardwood. Evelyn stood in the doorway watching him, arms crossed, not coldly, just cautious, like someone trying not to intrude on something delicate. "He doesn't talk much," Tom said, sanding down the frame of a door nearby. "I noticed," Evelyn replied quietly. "He used to." Wouldn't stop, Tom added with a soft smile. "But after the accident, it's like the words got trapped inside. We've been trying therapy, but strangers make him freeze." Evelyn nodded, still watching. "He doesn't seem afraid here." Tom glanced over. Noah had lined up 4 toy cars in a neat row, organizing them by color. He was humming softly, unaware that anyone was listening. "It's the quiet," Tom said. "Some spaces don't ask anything of you. This house, it's got silence, but not the heavy kind. The kind that lets you breathe." Evelyn's gaze shifted to the floorboards, the walls. "It wasn't always like that." Tom paused his sanding. "You've been remembering things, haven't you?" She hesitated, then said, "The kitchen used to smell like nutmeg. My mom loved to bake, but she'd only do it when my father was gone. It was like she saved joy for the times she felt safe." A pause. She was never really safe. Tom listened, eyes focused but quiet, giving her space. "One night I spilled milk all over the kitchen floor," Evelyn continued. "I was maybe 6. My father screamed so loud the windows rattled. My mom stepped in front of me, took the blame. She had this tiny scar on her cheek after that." Her voice dropped. "She never said how she got it?" Tom set his tools down. "You don't have to tell me this. I know," she said, voice barely audible. "But I want to. Because somehow this place is becoming less about what happened, and more about what might still be possible." In the corner, Noah stood up quietly and walked to the doorway holding his toy car. He looked at Evelyn. For a moment, she didn't move. Then he walked over, arm outstretched. Evelyn knelt slowly to his level. The boy placed the car in her palm. "He's giving it to you," Tom said gently. "That's a big deal." Evelyn looked at the little car, a faded red convertible with a missing door. It was old, battered, and clearly loved. "What's its name?" she asked. Noah hesitated, then whispered almost inaudibly, "Bolt." Evelyn looked up at Tom, eyes wide. "That's the first word he said to someone else in months," Tom said, quietly stunned. She didn't say anything. She just looked back at the boy and her face softened in a way Tom had never seen. Not in boardrooms, not at cafes, not in shadowed stairwells. "Bolt is fast," Noah said again, just barely louder. "But he doesn't race anymore. He's tired." Evelyn's throat tightened. Maybe Bolt needs a place to rest. Noah nodded. "Can he stay here?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Of course." Tom stepped back, watching the scene unfold like a silent witness to something sacred. It wasn't just a child offering a toy. It was a child letting someone in. And it wasn't just Evelyn accepting it. It was Evelyn forgiving the house. Later that afternoon, while Tom worked in the basement replacing rusted pipes, Evelyn and Noah sat in the sunlit living room. She showed him a dusty box of old keys and buttons she'd found in a drawer. This one, she said, holding up a brass key used to open the garden shed, but it never worked unless you jiggled it just right. Noah took it carefully, eyes wide. "Can we see?" She smiled. "Let's ask your dad." The shed out back hadn't been touched in over a decade. Tom pried the door open with a crowbar, and sunlight spilled into the musty interior. Tools, crates, an old rocking chair, and a few unopened boxes lined the walls. Evelyn pulled one down and opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of old photographs, faded Polaroids, a few drawings, a cracked ceramic mug with Atira 1. Mom in crooked letters. "I thought she left with nothing," Evelyn whispered. "But she left me." Tom moved to her side. "Maybe she hoped someday you'd come back." Evelyn picked up a photo, her age 7, missing 2 front teeth, holding a kitten with wild eyes. She sat down on the grass and showed it to Noah, who leaned in silently. "My mom's name was Claire," she said. She had the loudest laugh. It made the birds fly away. Noah looked at her and nodded once. "I like that name." The sun dipped lower, casting gold through the trees. Tom closed the shed doors as the breeze stirred the leaves. He looked at Evelyn and Noah sitting side by side in the grass, the boy rolling a second toy car toward her outstretched hand. Something was happening. Not dramatic, not fast, but deep, lasting. Evelyn was no longer just visiting the past. She was rebuilding it. One memory, one word, one child's trust at a time. And for the first time in years, Tom felt something stirring in his chest, too. Hope. The house was slowly coming back to life. A few weeks had passed since Tom first stepped into the creaking doorway. The furnace now hummed with quiet resolve, and the lights flickered a little less each day. Noah had begun visiting more often, carving out his own silent routines, lining up toy cars along the baseboard, sitting by the front window with a book he didn't read, sketching abstract patterns in the dust with his finger. And Evelyn. She, too, was changing, though she didn't quite realize it yet. She came earlier, stayed longer. She brought paint samples and measuring tape. On some days, she brought muffins from the cafe. She even started keeping a coat on a peg by the door. But there was one place she never went. The hallway upstairs was narrow and dim, lit only by a cracked skylight. At the far end stood a door-paint peeling brass knob, tarnished, a faint outline of fingerprints smudged around the frame. It had been her childhood room. She never mentioned it, never acknowledged it. If Tom ever caught her glancing that way, her shoulders would stiffen, her mouth harden. And so he left it alone, until one day Noah didn't. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Tom was under the kitchen sink, replacing a valve, humming tunelessly to himself. Evelyn was outside, taking a call from her assistant, pacing the porch. She rarely brought work here anymore, but the call had been urgent. Inside, Noah wandered the upstairs hallway. He'd never been told not to. And children, especially those who don't often speak, move like water slipping through cracks adults don't expect. He stood before the closed-door toy car in one hand. He tilted his head, listening. The house didn't breathe exactly, but this room felt like it was waiting. He turned the knob. It resisted, then gave. The hinges squeaked in protest as the door opened inward, revealing a world long forgotten by everyone but the walls themselves. The room was small, the air stale. Dust floated in beams of sunlight slicing through the half-closed blinds. A single bed sat pushed against the wall, covered in a faded patchwork quilt. A dollhouse leaned sideways on a crooked shelf. One corner of the room was covered with childlike crayon drawings, stars, heartstick figures with lopsided smiles. Noah stepped inside slowly. His footfall stirred the dust like memory. He crossed to the shelf and ran a finger along the edge of the dollhouse, then glanced at the wall. One drawing in particular caught his attention, 2 figures holding hands under a tree, the words "Me and Mama" scrawled underneath in red crayon. Behind him, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Noah Evelyn's voice was sharper than it had ever been, laced with something raw. He turned as she appeared in the doorway, breath-short hand gripping the frame like it anchored her to the ground. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Noah shrank back slightly, clutching his toy. Tom appeared behind her brows, furrowed. "Everything okay?" Evelyn didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the room. Her room, the drawings, the bed, the air. She took one step inside, then another. Noah handed her the toy car. She stared at it blankly, not understanding. "It's safe," he whispered. "I think it wants you to stay." Her breath caught. Tom moved beside her. He didn't mean to go in without asking. He was just exploring. Evelyn shook her head, but not in anger. "It's not that," she said, voice breaking. "It's just, I haven't seen this room in 30 years. Tom and Noah watched in silence as she stepped fully inside. Her hand brushed the quilt. Her fingers reached for the drawing on the wall. "I made this the day before she left," she whispered. "We spent all afternoon coloring. She braided my hair, made pancakes for dinner. It was the only day I remember feeling like maybe things could be okay." She turned to them, slowly, eyes shining. "I slept here alone that night. She never came back." Noah moved first. He walked to the bed, sat on the edge, and patted the space beside him. Evelyn hesitated. Then gently she sat down. Tom leaned on the doorframe, watching with quiet reverence. Evelyn exhaled shakily and looked around. "It's strange. I built an empire so I'd never feel powerless again, and yet this room, this one little room, has always held me hostage." Tom stepped inside. "You're not that little girl anymore. You came back. You're here now." She nodded slowly. "And I'm not alone." They sat in silence for a long moment, 3 people in the middle of a room frozen in time, each with pieces missing, each slowly, carefully rebuilding. After a while, Evelyn stood and crossed to the window. She opened the blinds, letting sunlight flood the space. The dust swirled like confetti in the air. "I want to keep this room," she said quietly. "Exactly like this." Tom tilted his head. "You sure?" She nodded. "I need it. Not as a shrine, but as a promise." "To what?" "To never leave the child inside me behind again." Tom didn't respond. He didn't need to. Noah walked over, leaned against her leg, and looked up. She rested a hand on his shoulder. And, just like that, something shifted. The room that had held abandonment, fear, and silence now held comfort, connection, and the first fragile threads of healing. Downstairs, the furnace kicked on its steady rhythm, echoing through the floors like a heartbeat. And upstairs, Evelyn Drake, who had spent her life avoiding the past, let it breathe again. Not to relive it, but to reclaim it. It was a rainy morning when Tom found the folder. He hadn't meant to. He was in the small downstairs office Evelyn had begun clearing out the week before, a room that had once belonged to her father, now a tomb of rusted file cabinets and water-stained ledgers. She'd asked him to fix the warped floorboards near the window, and while moving an old desk, the back panel gave way with a sigh and a folder slipped loose, wedged deep in the cavity. It was unmarked. Tom hesitated, then opened it. Inside were contracts, dozens of them. Real estate deals, signed leases, transfer agreements. One in particular caught his eye, bold lettered at the top, Acquisition Authorization, Bradley Industrial Plant. His heart stopped. He read further. A familiar address, familiar signatures. And there it was, Evelyn Drake, her name in neat ink printed beneath a digital signature. The plant where he had worked for 10 years. The one that shut down without warning, laying off over 80 workers, including him. Where they'd packed up his toolbox like it meant nothing, and sent him home the same day his son was diagnosed with trauma-related anxiety. The paper trembled slightly in his hand. He had assumed naively, maybe, that Evelyn had no idea, that she was a distant figurehead disconnected from the hard-edged decisions made by those beneath her. But here it was. Her signature. Her call. He heard the front door open. Her voice echoed lightly from the hallway. "Tom." I brought sandwiches from the deli. Thought you might be hungry. He folded the folder closed, placed it on the desk, and stood, pulse still hammering. Evelyn stepped into the doorway, cheeks flushed from the cold. Her smile faded the moment she saw his face. What happened? He didn't speak at first, just handed her the folder. She took it, opened it, froze. I didn't know this was in there, she said slowly. But you signed it, Tom replied, voice low. Her lips parted. Yes, Tom. I didn't realize. He stepped back, jaw tight. You didn't realize what that 80 people lost their jobs, that you greenlit the closure of one of the last local manufacturing sites in the county. Her face drained of color. I receive hundreds of contracts a month. I was told it was an underperforming asset. There was no detail in the brief. I trusted my regional VP to do the hard part for you, he cut in. Evelyn flinched. I didn't know you worked there. That's the point, he said. You never asked. You never looked past the paperwork. Silence hung thick between them. Tom exhaled, voice shaking. I lost everything that year. My job, my insurance, my ability to keep Noah in therapy. I couldn't even afford to get our car fixed when winter came. I'm so sorry, she whispered. He looked at her. Really looked. The woman who had come undone in the kitchen of her childhood home, who had knelt beside his son without hesitation, who had slowly, unknowingly begun stitching his world back together. And yet, she had also been the one to tear it apart. I need to get some air, he said. He didn't slam the door, but the sound of it closing behind him landed like a thunderclap in her chest. Outside, rain drummed against the earth, washing away the last of the morning's frost. Tom stood beneath the porch overhang, arms crossed, heart in freefall. He wanted to be fair, wanted to believe she hadn't known, hadn't meant to, but intent didn't undo impact. It never did. Inside, Evelyn sat down heavily on the edge of the chair folder in her lap. Her mind spiraled. She remembered that quarter, the pressure to increase margins, the board's relentless pursuit of shareholder satisfaction. She'd delegated that region to a junior VP because her time was being pulled into a multi-million-dollar downtown expansion. No one had told her the plant was family-run. No one had told her it was the only income source for dozens of households, and she hadn't asked. Tears stung her eyes. Not the kind born from guilt alone, but shame. And the slow, painful realization that for all the walls she'd broken in her personal life, the walls she'd built professionally might have hurt more people than she could count. She found Noah's sketchpad on the living room floor. A new drawing, a house with lights in every window, 3 stick figures. One had curly hair like hers. She pressed a hand to her chest. That evening, when Tom returned to pick up his tool bag, Evelyn was waiting on the porch. He didn't look at her. I made a list, she said softly. He paused. A list of every site we closed during that year, every community we left behind. I started calling people, former employees, site managers, even church pastors in those towns. Tom turned slowly. I can't undo what's been done, she said, a voice breaking. But I can own it, and I can do better. Not just for the ones I see, but especially for the ones I didn't. He said nothing, eyes scanning her face. I've also spoken with the board, she added. I'm reallocating my bonuses this year to fund local repair programs and job placement assistance in the towns affected. It's not enough, but it's a start. He studied her. Why tell me all this? Because I need you to know, she said, that you weren't invisible. Not then. Not now. The rain had stopped. The sky cracked open above them in bands of gold and violet, the storm having washed the world into something quiet, raw, and new. Tom walked up the steps, his gaze softening. He didn't take her hand, but he didn't turn away either. And in that stillness, something held frail, yet unbroken. The beginning of trust earned the hard way. She handed him the sketchpad. Noah left it, she said. I thought you should have it. He opened it slowly. The drawing was different now. There was a tree beside the house, a car in the driveway, a sun peeking through the clouds. But most striking of all, each figure now had a name scrawled below it. Noah, Dad, Evelyn. Tom's hand trembled. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come with a grand gesture. Sometimes it comes in pencil, one careful letter at a time. The following weekend brought sunlight the kind that stretched across windows like forgiveness. The house felt different now, warmer, lived in. Evelyn had started showing up before Tom did, sometimes already unpacking boxes or scrubbing window panes with sleeves rolled up hair tucked into a bandana. Tom had begun to come back without hesitation. They didn't speak about the folder again, not directly, but something in the air between them had shifted thicker with honesty, thinner with fear. What neither of them expected was for Noah to speak again. It happened on a Saturday early afternoon. Evelyn had taken out a few old picture frames she'd found in the attic. Most were cracked or yellowed with age, but one held a photo she couldn't let go of her mother seated on the porch steps, arms around a little girl with wild brown curls and scraped knees. She'd left the photo on the coffee table while cleaning up. When she returned from the kitchen with lemonade, she found Noah standing by it, unmoving. He stared at it for a long time. Then he turned to Evelyn. "Was that your mom?" The words were soft, careful, but unmistakable. Evelyn nearly dropped the glass. "Yes," she said, her voice catching. "That's her. Her name was Claire." Noah nodded thoughtfully, then pointed at the little girl. "You look like her." Evelyn sat down slowly. "That's what people used to say." She smiled. "Big," Noah said, almost to himself. Like she didn't want you to be scared. Tom, who had just stepped in from the hallway with his toolbox, froze. He watched his son wide-eyed. Evelyn looked up at him, neither of them daring to speak, afraid the moment might shatter. Noah touched the edge of the photo frame. "My mom used to sing to me, in the car. After the crash." I forgot her voice. The words were plain, but they tore through the room like glass. Tom swallowed hard. Evelyn reached out and gently placed her hand over Noah's. "You didn't forget. It's just sleeping inside you. Sometimes love hides in quiet places until we're ready to remember." Noah looked at her, really looked, then leaned in and whispered, "Do you think she's proud of me?" Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "I think she's proud of you every time you wake up and try again." Tom had never seen his son lean against someone like that, someone who wasn't him. But there he was, pressed into Evelyn's side as if he'd been doing it forever. And Evelyn. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She wrapped her arm around him and held him like a promise. That night they had dinner together in the dining room, the three of them around a table that hadn't hosted a meal in decades. Evelyn lit 2 candles. Tom brought chili in a crock pot. Noah set the table in precise little rows, placing spoons like treasures. "Do you want me to say grace?" he asked at one point, then added quickly, "Even if I don't know how to do it." Like church, Evelyn smiled. "Maybe you can just say what you're thankful for." Noah thought for a moment. "I'm thankful for chili, and the tree out back, and that Bolt got his wheel fixed." Tom smirked. "Anything else?" The boy looked down at his lap, then up again. "I'm thankful for Evelyn." There was silence. Evelyn blinked hard, then reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm thankful for you too, Noah." Tom didn't speak. He just looked at them, 2 people who had never been meant to cross paths yet somehow found each other in a house full of old echoes. Later that evening, after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, Evelyn sat on the porch with Tom. A blanket draped over both their shoulders, mugs of tea cradled between their hands. "He's healing," Evelyn said quietly. "So are you." She glanced at him. "It's strange, isn't it? How someone so small can carry so much and still forgive without even being asked to." Tom's voice was low. "He doesn't know how to hate. He never learned. I think that's what saved him." Evelyn stared out at the trees swaying in the dusk. "I spent years building walls so no one could reach me. I thought power meant protection. I thought strength meant staying alone. And now she leaned her head against his shoulder. Now I think maybe strength is letting someone sit next to you when the storm hits. Tom didn't move. He just breathed her in. A breeze stirred the wind chimes above them. Evelyn closed her eyes. "You know," she said after a pause, "my mother used to sit right here. At night, when my father was out, she'd hold my hand and tell me there was more than this town, more than this pain. I never believed her. But she was right," Tom said. Evelyn opened her eyes. "I want this place to mean something again. It already does. No, I mean, for others. For people like us. People who've lost things they don't talk about. People who are trying to find their voice again. Maybe it could be a place where they come to rest. To feel safe." Tom looked at her, the idea taking shape between them like something half-remembered and fully alive. A home for second chances. She smiled. Exactly. Inside, Noah stirred on the couch. He opened his eyes slowly and glanced toward the door. He could see them through the glass, his dad laughing softly and Evelyn, her head resting gently against him. He closed his eyes again, safe in the rhythm of their voices, the hush of wind in the trees, and the warmth of knowing that for the first time in his young life, he wasn't waiting for someone to leave. He was learning what it felt like when people stayed. The sky had turned a muted gray, heavy with late autumn weight as Evelyn drove alone into the city. It had been months since she stepped foot in her penthouse apartment overlooking downtown. The silence there no longer felt like peace. It felt like distance. She walked into the space, slowly keys jangling in the hollow entryway. Glass walls, gleaming counters, designer furnishings, everything polished and precise. Everything she'd once believed proved she'd made it. Now it all just felt cold. She stood in front of the sleek black console table in her foyer where a single white envelope waited. Her name, written in handwriting she hadn't seen in years. Daniel, the man who had once promised her forever. The man she had sent that message to, the message that had found its way to Tom instead. She sat down on the arm of the couch, heart pounding as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded crisply in thirds. "Evelyn, I saw your number pop up a few nights ago. I recognized it immediately. You don't forget someone like you. I didn't answer because I didn't know what I could say. I never did things right by you. Not when I left, not when I stayed silent. I was young, and you were more than I knew how to handle. But I saw the news recently about the job restitution initiative your company launched. That sounded like you. The real you, not the boardroom version. I hope whoever that message was meant for got to you in time." Evelyn sat frozen, the paper trembling in her hands. A strange calmness settled over her, not closure exactly, but confirmation. The man she'd waited for, written for, ached for, had read her words. And still didn't come. But maybe that was the gift. She folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then she walked to the window and looked out over the city that had once made her feel invincible. It had taken losing her footing, her certainty, and her illusion of control to realize something far more important. She had been waiting for the wrong person. That night she returned to the house. Tom was already there, working on the deck. Noah sat at the table inside, drawing with deep concentration, his tongue slightly between his teeth in that way kids always seem to do when they're focused. Evelyn stepped up onto the porch. Tom glanced up. "You okay?" She held up the envelope. I finally heard from him. He straightened. "The one you wrote the message to." She nodded, then tore the letter in two, calmly without ceremony, and tossed it into the nearby trash bin. Tom said nothing, watching her closely. "It felt like the last page of a book I stopped reading a long time ago," she said. "And now, I don't need to reread it." Tom leaned against the post. "So, what happens next?" Evelyn walked to the railing and looked out at the quiet field beyond the house. The sky was streaked with lavender and rose. She took a breath, long and full. "I want to open the house." Tom raised an eyebrow. "You mean, I want it to be a place where people can come to heal. Single parents, foster youth, people like us, who didn't get the perfect start but still have so much to give. He studied her, this woman who had once lived in penthouses and private jets, now barefoot on a weathered porch planning a sanctuary from scratch. "You're serious?" She turned to him, eyes steady. Dead serious. A soft voice floated from the screen door behind them. "I can help." Noah stood in the doorway holding his latest drawing. He walked over and handed it to Evelyn. It was the house again this time, with string lights across the porch and small figures standing out front. One held a suitcase. One wore glasses. One looked just like Noah. Evelyn looked at the picture. "Who are they, people who need us?" Noah said. She crouched to his level. "And who are we?" He pointed to the figures at the center of the picture. "We're the ones who stayed." Evelyn pulled him into a hug, the kind you don't even realize you need until someone gives it to you. The next morning, Evelyn walked through every room of the house with a yellow notepad making lists. New beds, fresh linens, a repaired roof, wheelchair access for the back entrance. She made calls, sent emails. Tom watched from the workshop window, marveling at the quiet ferocity in her step, like someone reclaiming more than just a building. Reclaiming purpose. Later that day, she handed Tom the notepad. He whistled. "You don't think small." Never have she said smiling. "But I do think local." Together, they planned. Each room became a chapter in something new, a shared kitchen, a reading nook for children, a small garden for hands that needed to grow something. The town caught wind of it quickly. Some were skeptical, an old CEO turning her family's haunted house into a refuge, but others remembered the plant closure fund, the apology letters, the phone calls. And most remembered how Evelyn's mother Claire used to hand out cookies to kids on bicycles from that very porch. History, it seemed, had waited patiently for a rewrite. That evening, Evelyn sat in the room that once held her childhood nightmares. The walls had been cleaned but not painted. She wanted the crayon drawings to stay. They were part of the story. Tom entered with 2 mugs of tea. He didn't say anything at first, just handed her one and sat beside her. She looked at the wall. "I used to think that little girl in those drawings was abandoned." Tom looked over. And now, she smiled, tears in her voice, but not in her eyes. "Now, I think she was just waiting to be found." They sat in silence, their shoulders touching the room, no longer dark. Outside, a single light on the porch flickered on. Inside, Evelyn Drake, who had once sent a message into the void and never received an answer, was now writing a new one every day. Not to someone far away, but to the ones who were finally finding their way home. The town meeting hall hadn't changed in decades, rows of folding chairs that creaked when you shifted wood-paneled walls darkened by time, and a coffee station that brewed more nostalgia than caffeine. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, her palms lightly pressed to the podium. Behind her, a faded map of the county was pinned to the corkboard, and beside it, projected onto a small screen, was a simple sketch her house surrounded by garden beds, small cottages, and a community room drawn in pencil and hope. She glanced at the familiar faces, gathered local business owners, a school principal, a retired firefighter, and a few neighbors who'd known her mother Claire. Among them sat Tom, his arms crossed over his chest, quiet but steady. Noah sat beside him, swinging his legs, the drawing he'd made now printed on the flyer in everyone's hands. Evelyn cleared her throat. "I'm not here as the CEO of anything," she began, her voice clear but gentle. "I'm here as someone who left this town a long time ago, and finally came home." There was a hush in the room, soft but leaning forward. She took a breath. "Some of you knew my mother. She was complicated. Life wasn't easy inside that house, and for years I thought the only way to survive was to escape. And I did. I built companies, I made money, I got good at winning." A pause, but I forgot how to stay. Someone shifted in the third row, but no one spoke. I came back to the house thinking I might tear it down. But instead, I found something I never expected: grace in its rawest form. A single dad who showed up because of a message I never meant to send. A boy who gave me his toy car and his trust. and a town that, despite everything, still remembers my mother's laugh. A quiet ripple moved through the audience. Evelyn gestured to the projection behind her. This is the Quiet House Project. It's not a nonprofit or a business. It's a promise. We want to open the doors to people like me, like Tom. People who've been through something and need a place to catch their breath. Parents trying to rebuild. Kids who've slipped through cracks. We'll offer temporary stays, job resources therapy, and maybe a little hope. She hesitated before her next words. But for that, I need the town's blessing. I need a zoning variance. Technically, the house is still residential, and a project like this, it scares the paperwork. But I think it could save people, like it saved me. Silence. Then a hand went up. Old Mrs. Willoughby, who'd lived 2 blocks from Claire Drake until the day she died, stood slowly. Her voice was raspy with age, but clear. I remember your mother. She used to sit on her porch and hum Patsy Cline while peeling apples. She brought soup to my house when my husband broke his hip, and she always had too much sadness in her eyes. But she loved you, Evelyn. That much was always clear. Evelyn blinked hard. Mrs. Willoughby nodded. If you want to honor her and help others find a soft place to land, I say yes. A murmur of agreement followed. The principal stood next. We've had 3 students this year alone placed in emergency shelters hours away. A resource like this close to home would be a godsend. Tom didn't speak. He didn't need to. His quiet presence was a pillar. But when he reached over and rested a hand on Evelyn's lower back, grounding her, she felt the truth more than any word. The town voted. Unanimous. The house would become the Quiet House. They celebrated with lemonade and cookies afterward on folding tables just outside the building. Noah showed off his drawings. Tom fielded questions from curious neighbors about plumbing codes and heating plans. Evelyn stood in the grass arm's folded wind, catching her hair, letting it fall freely for once. June, the cafe owner, approached with 2 paper cups and handed one to Evelyn. Didn't think I'd see the day you were back for good, June said with a sideways smile. Evelyn chuckled. Neither did I. June took a sip of her drink. But I always knew you'd do something bigger than yourself. Claire used to say you had stars in your spine. Evelyn smiled, then let her gaze drift across the parking lot to the field behind it, open space waiting for something kind to be built. She also used to say I'd either run the world or run away from it. Well, June said, looks like you're doing both in reverse. They laughed, and it wasn't bitter. It wasn't wounded. It was light. Real. That night, back at the house, Evelyn wandered out to the shed where the old photographs and memories still lived. She flipped through a worn photo album she hadn't dared touch before. There was her mother again and again, always half smiling, always holding something, a pie, a child, a secret. One picture made her stop. Her mother standing in front of the house, one hand resting on her belly, pregnant with Evelyn. The house still knew before the walls bore scars, before the silence. On the back, scribbled in blue ink, "This house will know love if it's the last thing I do." Evelyn pressed the photo to her chest and whispered, "It will." Later, as she sat on the porch with Tom Noah asleep inside, wind chimes clinking gently above them, she leaned her head on his shoulder. "You think people will come?" she asked. Tom didn't hesitate. "They already are. Starting with you." She looked out at the darkness full of stars. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the night, because this house once meant to be sold, torn down, and forgotten was now something else entirely. It was becoming. And so was she. The first snow of the season arrived softly like a whisper across the rooftops. Tom watched it fall from the window of the nearly finished community kitchen. Inside the house, the scent of fresh paint and sawdust mingled with the earthy aroma of hot cider Evelyn had brought earlier that morning. The house was coming alive, not just structurally, but in spirit. It breathed now, laughed even. Its corners no longer echoed emptiness but hummed with quiet preparation for what was to come. Noah ran through the hallways in mismatched socks, chasing a paper airplane. Evelyn followed a moment later carrying two mugs' cheeks pink from the cold and joy. But Tom had been quiet since the night before. Something about the season's change stirred memories. The anniversary of Lily's death always came around this time, and even though 3 years had passed, grief had its own seasons. It didn't ask permission. He felt Evelyn's presence before she said a word. "Your eyes go somewhere else when it snows," she said, handing him a mug. Tom took it slowly. She loved the snow, said it made the world look honest again. Evelyn didn't reply, just leaned against the windowsill beside him. He continued. "The night she died. It was the first snow of that year. She messaged me from the car, said she didn't feel well. I was under a water heater at a job site, phone on silent. I didn't check the text until 40 minutes later. A beat passed. She was already gone when I called back. Ran off the road into a tree. Noah was in the back seat." Evelyn closed her eyes, her throat tightening. "She was everything good I ever had," Tom whispered. "And for a long time I thought the universe was punishing me for not being enough, for not being fast enough." Evelyn turned to him. "You were surviving. Sometimes that's all we can do." He looked at her, the edges of his pain softening just a little. "You think? If I'd answered, she'd still be here." She paused, searching for the truest answer. "I think she already knew you were everything she needed, whether you saw the message or not." Tom exhaled, deep and slow. Snow tapped gently against the glass. "I got your message," he said finally. Evelyn furrowed her brow. "That night, the one you didn't mean to send, I wasn't the one it was for, but it found me anyway. And maybe it wasn't just about you being saved. Maybe it was about me, too." She blinked, eyes glassy. "Tom, you showed up," he said simply, "in the middle of your own mess. You stayed, and you let me stay too." The warmth between them was no longer tentative. It was rooted, steady. Not passion exploding in a fire, but the quiet kind that doesn't burn out. That evening, Evelyn returned to the cafe for the first time since that night. She sat at the same corner table under the same pendant light that buzzed faintly like an old memory. June brought her tea without asking. "You're glowing," June said with a smile. "Looks good on you." Evelyn chuckled. "Feels unfamiliar, like wearing shoes that finally fit." She pulled a card from her coat pocket. On it were hand-lettered words. "You're invited to the quiet house, a place for rest, repair, and rediscovery." She placed it on the table, sliding it toward June. "You were the first person who showed me kindness in this town when I was young," Evelyn said. "Now I want this house to do the same for others." June touched the card, nodded slowly. "Your mother would have wept if she saw this." Evelyn's breath caught. "You think so? She wanted better for you, even when she couldn't give it herself." They sat in silence, sipping tea as the world outside blurred with snow and headlights. Then Evelyn reached into her bag and took out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She opened the old message thread, the one that had accidentally been sent months ago. Still there, still unsent by her own hand, as if the universe had whispered it forward on her behalf. This time she typed something new. "I sent a message into the world," the wrong person answered. Or maybe the right one. She paused, then deleted it. Instead, she stood, placed her coat over her arm, and left a different note on the napkin beneath her tea. "If you ever come looking, don't. I'm not waiting at the cafe anymore. I've gone home." She stepped out into the night, the bell above the door ringing behind her like closure. Back at the house, Tom was tucking Noah into bed. The boy had drawn a new sign for the front gate in crayon and tape. "Welcome to the quiet house. Kind people inside." As Tom pulled the blanket over him, Noah whispered, "Are we going to stay here forever?" Tom paused, brushing a hand through his son's hair. "If it feels like home. Maybe we already are." Evelyn stepped through the door just as the clock struck midnight. Her boots dusted in snow, her cheeks flushed but her eyes bright and calm. Tom met her in the hallway. No words, just a look. She smiled and placed something in his hand. It was the torn napkin from the cafe. On the back, in her handwriting, "I'm not waiting anymore. I'm building something worth staying for." He read it, folded it carefully, then pulled her into his arms, their bodies warm against the chill that crept through the windows. Outside, snow blanketed the steps. Inside, love settled without pretense, without fear. And somewhere in the town, maybe someone still wandered into cafes looking for someone who never showed. But Evelyn. She had stopped looking. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive through the door. Sometimes it's already in the room, hammering a nail, fixing a leak, helping a boy find his voice again. And staying. Always staying. Spring arrived like a slow exhale. At first, it crept in, quietly melting the last of the snow from the window ledges, coaxing crocuses out of the ground beside the porch, stirring birdsong back into the trees that had stood silent all winter. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window of the newly opened quiet house watching a boy in a yellow raincoat plant a tomato seedling beside Noah, who gave instructions in gestures more than words. There were 3 families staying in the house now. Each had their own story. A young mother fleeing a controlling relationship, a Vietnam vet raising his granddaughter, a teenager transitioning out of foster care. No one was perfect, but every day something bloomed. Evelyn sipped her tea and smiled to herself. She hadn't worn heels in 4 months. Her old wardrobe, the crisp suits, the precise lines hung untouched in the attic. She didn't need them anymore. Out here among paint cans and repaired fences, she had found something better than control. She had found connection. The front door opened behind her and Tom stepped in, dusting dirt from his jeans. Garden beds are in. Noah's teaching Kevin how to draw race cars now. "He's getting really good with the other kids," Evelyn said, setting her mug down. Tom came closer, wrapping his arms around her from behind his chin, resting on her shoulder. "That's because this place gave him something he didn't have before." "What's that?" Tom smiled against her skin. "A reason to feel safe." They stood there a while, letting the moment settle warm and steady. The official open house was scheduled for that weekend. Neighbors came by with pies and casseroles. Volunteers showed up with toolkits and folding tables. Local officials sent flowers, and the town paper ran a front-page story titled "A House with a Second Heart." There were no ribbon cuttings, no red carpets, just a welcome sign hand-painted by Noah and Kevin that read, "Come as you are." In the living room, Evelyn stood before a fireplace she and Tom had restored themselves, stone by stone, brick by brick. Her voice trembled only once when she spoke. "My mother once told me this house would know love, even if it was the last thing she did. I didn't understand her then. But I do now. This place isn't perfect. Neither are the people in it. But we've stopped waiting for someone to save us. We're doing it together." Applause filled the room, but Evelyn's eyes found just one face, Noah, standing near the stairs holding the first message she ever wrote. The one that had gone to the wrong person. Or maybe the right one all along. That evening, when the house quieted and the guests trickled out, Evelyn walked alone to the back field. A single bench sat beneath a blooming cherry tree Tom had planted for her birthday. She sat, letting the fading sun rest on her skin. In her hand, she held the napkin. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but if you're still out there, I'll be at the place. I'll wait." It felt like another life. She thought of who she had been when she wrote it, how her heart had been all edges, how her silence had screamed louder than words, how she'd waited for someone to return who never would because he wasn't meant to. Instead, someone else had come. Not to fix her, but to remind her she wasn't broken. "Do you regret sending it?" Tom asked, appearing beside her with 2 mugs of cocoa. Evelyn looked up. "I didn't send it." He sat beside her. "You did. Maybe not with your hands, but your heart did. And I answered it." She smiled, taking the cocoa. They sat in silence, watching Noah race across the grass with 2 other children laughing so loudly the birds took flight. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. Tom shook his head. No, but I think we were always meant to. She turned to him. You saved me, Tom. He looked at her calm and full. We saved each other. The breeze carried the scent of earth and wood smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime rang softly as if echoing the peace in Evelyn's chest. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a new napkin, blank and fresh. She wrote, "To the one who stayed. Thank you for answering a message not meant for you. Thank you for becoming the answer I never knew I needed." She handed it to Tom. He read it and folded it into his heart. That night, the porch light glowed warm and gold. Inside, the quiet house breathed steadily, its halls filled with quiet laughter and soft footsteps, its walls holding stories not of pain, but of persistence. Evelyn tucked Noah in beside two other children in the shared room. She kissed his forehead, turned out the light, and paused in the doorway. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered. From beneath the covers, a sleepy voice murmured, "I'm glad you stayed." She smiled, turning off the light. Downstairs, Tom waited in the kitchen, sketching new plans for a tool shed. Evelyn came behind him, slid her arms around his waist, and rested her cheek against his back. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "Neither am I." They turned off the lights together and stepped outside beneath a sky so clear it could carry 100 dreams at once. And in that final moment when the stars blinked their slow, knowing light, Evelyn realized she had never been lost. Her message had simply taken the long way home. A house can't heal you, but it can hold you while you heal yourself. And sometimes the people who answer the wrong message turn out to be the ones worth keeping forever. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel for more heartfelt journeys like this one. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Your presence means more than you know,